sure that we have all of the school board members back and that we're able to hear each other, and that everybody's microphone is operational. Ms. Tolan.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Mr. Frisch.
Hello.
Hello. Ms. McLaughlin.
Good afternoon.
Hello. And I'm not seeing who else is back. Let's go down a little bit. Ms. Omesh.
Here.
Ms. Keys Gamara.
I'm here.
Thank you. Ms. Pekarsky.
I'm here.
Ms. Dana Kofax, are you by chance back with us yet?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm just going to wrap up roll call because I have a list going, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Great.
Ms. Cohen?
I'm here, but on my phone. So my apologies. My laptop will not turn on. So
We're having a day with this.
Hey.
Okay, and who am I missing that I have not yet called? Ms. Marin is not yet with us. Ms. Marin? So we'll wait for Ms. Marin. She'll join us a little bit later. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser?
I'm here.
Okay, and then I am here. Ms. Dana Kofax, Ms. Marin is the only one who will be signing on in a little while, so I will turn it over to you at this time.
All right. I see Dr. Brabrand has his hand up. I'll defer to him.
Thank you, Ms. Dernak Kovacs. Just information during the break, one of the things that staff has done, and I'm sure you're aware, but for all board members, we did provide a document for you to look at other school districts in terms of what they're looking at for their compensation, and we can put that up as you would direct or not direct. And we also have your motion revised with the percentage at 3% instead of 2%. Just wanted to share those two things right out of the gate that may help you in your conversations.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Brabrand. And as Ms. McLaughlin and I talked over the break, as did Dr. Anderson, and as Ms. McLaughlin's motion stated, we are wanting to talk about the compensation piece. And Ms. Burden, and as well, Ms. McLaughlin had asked to see a document that you had provided to you had provided, I think, to most of the board, but now we're making certain it's updated. And this is where our current WABE partners, our Washington Area School Boards Association groups, where they are on their budget requests for the state. So if we could put that up and also put up the my motion as revised by Ms. Corbett-Sanders' suggestion. And if we could briefly go over that, and then what I have, we had talked about reserving this time right now to have 2 minutes for each board member who has questions on this. I will most likely need the help of Mr. Malloy and Ms. Burden throughout this conversation. 2 minutes followed by 1 minute, and that's going to be a tight timeline. So Ms. Burden, if you could just briefly go over this chart and what it means to us right here at this point in time.
Yeah, basically we did a survey in February of our WABE jurisdictions. And this is basically the result or the responses from that survey. Alexandria has proposed a 2.6% step increase plus a 1% bonus for those at the top of the scale and an MSA for those eligible from their comp study, which I'm not familiar with. Arlington's budget's not released until February the 25th, so we don't know what their proposal is at this point. Fairfax, at this point, the superintendent's proposed includes year 3 of the CIS phase-in only. Falls Church is assuming a 2.5% plus 0.5% MSA for a total of 3. Loudoun County is proposed a 2.4% step increase plus a 3.5% MSA for a total of 5.9%. Manassas City is proposing a step increase of 2%. Manassas Park is proposing a step of 3% and a MSA of 1.5%. But it should be noted that Manassas Park doesn't really have salary schedules, so these percentages are based on midpoints of the scale. I'm not as familiar with theirs as with some of the other salary scales. And then Montgomery County is in the middle of collective bargaining, and so their comp increases are not yet known. And Prince William released their budget, I think, last Thursday, maybe the Thursday before, and they're proposing a 2.8% step plus a 1% MSA for a total of 3.8.
Thank you, Ms. Burden. And next, if we could just look at what a 3% would look like for us with the revisions from a 2% to a 3%.
Ms.
So these are
Koufax, this,
Yes,
has
ma'am.
this has a couple of typos in it because I'm moving at the speed of light.
Yes.
So I need to revise section B to say to recognize the state's share of a 3% salary increase included in the General Assembly's
Okay.
budget. And if you can just give me a second, I'll make that change.
All right, we will give you, while you make that change, again, clarifying our format for now until 3 o'clock. Dr. Anderson has asked if we can end by 3 o'clock. And that will be, this conversation will focus, as Ms. McLaughlin said, on this compensation issue, which is quite a large issue, asking questions, figuring out where we want to go as a board. First round, Ms. Cornell, I believe you'll be taking the time. I don't see I assume Ms. Malberg is here somewhere, but I don't see whomever is keeping the time. It will be 2 minutes. And if there are needed go backs, 1 minute.
I am here, Mr. Koufax. I'm signed in on the joint account, and I will be keeping time.
Thank you, Ms. Malberg. Much appreciation. All right, so I will go. I have a hand up. So Ms. Corbett Sanders, this is your 2 minutes.
Yes, I just have a clarification. In looking at a 3% increase by the Fairfax County, if we were to go with the 3% increase in our budget ask and something happened and the state did not fund it, it would allow us to ensure that we got at a minimum a 2% increase for our staff. Is that correct?
I believe that Ms. Burden.
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
So things fall apart in the negotiations at the state level. However, we go ahead and we put into our budget ask a 3% increase, and we don't get any additional funding from the state. That 3% increase for us would then at a minimum cover the 2% that was part of the original proposal by Ms. Derenak Koufax. Is that correct?
That's correct. And, you know, you would have the option then of reducing the budget instead of 3% to, you know, whatever the state landed on during reconciliation.
Correct. But it does preserve, it preserves our flexibility. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And does this put us in line with also the federal employees? Because I know federal employees in the Washington metro area are also receiving a pay increase, and the majority of our, or the largest employer in the DC metro area is the federal government. Is that correct?
I do not know what the federal government is doing.
Okay. I've read that they're planning on giving a pay increase as well. So, and our staff today, as of January 1st, is it correct that they're making less money, they're taking home less money today than they were prior to January 1st because of the increases in health benefits?
Yes, I believe that's correct. I believe that every plan regardless of what the employee's choice was, employee only, family plan, Care First, Kaiser, Aetna, they all had increases. And so as a result, that would be the case.
Thank you. This has been very helpful. I will continue to advocate for the full 3%. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. Just turning on my microphone here. One of the things that I heard very clearly from our colleagues is the fact that we needed to prioritize what our ask is of the Board of Supervisors. If you could speak to this, Ms. Burden or Dr. Braybrand, once we present whatever it is that we present to them, they're not earmarking that because we're asking for this compensation, it has to go to there. They just give us what they provide us, and we still have lots of flexibility in terms of rearranging those dollars. Is that correct?
That's correct, Dr. Anderson. And, again, they want to understand what's behind our request for the county transfer. And again, in the end, we have to present our budget in advance of the county presenting theirs. We know what the county revenue estimate was from the fall. Their revenue growth is very, very low. They are seeing an increase in the residential revenue from the fall presentation, but they were also seeing a decrease in the commercial real estate. And again, real estate is one of the primary drivers for county revenues. So we continue to be in regular touch with the county executive. We have heard that revenues are still very, very tight, and we'll see what their updated estimates are here in February compared to what we saw in November. So we've tried to do, again, a budget based on consultation and collaboration with the county. We certainly shared with them that if they were able to do compensation for their folks, that we would want to join in having compensation for our folks and the funds to do it. But it remains to be seen whether compensation for county employees is on the table for this upcoming budget. And we'll continue to work with them in the weeks and months ahead. And I certainly understand the conversation by the board today about seeing that the state is signaling additional funds to support its teachers and support staff and education, and that we want to do the same so that we don't fall behind. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I just wanted to be sure that we were clear that the prioritization is ours, and whether or not we present this to the Board of Supervisors, it's really not the crux of how we reconcile what we want to do based on what we receive from the county. Speaking on the second part, this came up earlier and I wanted to do it then, but I didn't have a turn lined up, so I'm going to use it now. We have had extensive discussions, I think, with Chairman McKay, our budget chair, Ms. Marin. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit if you don't mind. She engaged, and I think she shared with this board that she was going to be engaging in a discussion with Chairman McKay, who's also the budget chair of the county, and I accompanied her since Ms. Dernock Koufax had a prior commitment, where we asked very specific questions regarding what will be happening on the county side. Ms. Marin, would you be willing to kind of give a summary of that discussion?
Hi, yeah, I mean, it was pretty brief. They haven't put forth their budget yet, and they're not anticipating having, tens of millions of dollars available for compensation. So, I don't feel like there's really anything new. It was a good spirited conversation in that there's collegiality and a desire to want to do things together. And in fact, we're going to be having more frequent communications to, over the long term work together. So, I also did at some point ask the chairman about how the county has weathered the increases in private medical insurance, which they've done a bit. They've been a bit stronger at that than we have, but that's a multi-year initiative to try and take that on our side of the house. So, like Ms. Burden has said several times today, we have to see what the county is going to put forth publicly. It's not known yet.
Thank you. And I hated to have to put you on the spot, but I think it was important that all of our colleagues had to hear what that discussion was with Chairman McKay, who also serves as the chair of their budget committee. In terms of the proposal that we're discussing here, I'm happy to hear more from the rest of my colleagues. But as I shared before, I'm very hesitant because these are big ticket dollars, and I want to be sure that we're providing ourselves some flexibility in terms of how we respond to whatever we get. We should certainly put on the table what our needs are. And it doesn't make sense to me that, particularly given this chart that Ms. Burden has shared, that we have every single one of our surrounding jurisdictions being able to provide something for their employees, especially Loudoun, whose something is quite significant and seems to be an outlier amongst all of us. I'm very curious in terms of how they're able to do that and we're able to do nothing at all, which doesn't seem right to me. So thank you. I'm glad to move forward with this ask of 2%, but I have to say I have hesitation over 3%.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Ms. Tolan.
Okay, so two things. One, I was wondering as far as the actual amendment for Thursday, if instead of saying 3%, we said something like, because we're waiting to see what the state is going to come up with, right? It could be 3%, it could be 4%, it could be up to 5%. And, you know, we started out at 2%. Is it possible to say something like provide a 2% market rate adjustment for all employees or a rate that is identified by the state, you know, for school district employee raises, you know, something like that, just throwing that out on the table. But I wanted to ask more specifically, looking at this table, we see different school districts doing step increases, you know, market salary adjustments, COLA. And we were talking earlier that for each percentage of a, you know, market adjustment, that it's approximately for Fairfax County, you know, $25 million. Do we have similar numbers like that for a step increase and for COLA, or is it too complicated, you know, to make it that easy? I don't know, Ms. Burden, if you have any information on that.
Yeah, the cost of step increase is $53 million. And, you know, another 1% is nearly 25 million. So a step plus 1% is about 78 million. So it's about the same, give or take, from the state.
I'm sorry. If you say if you give everybody like one step, did you say it's 78 million?
53 million.
53.
And then a 1% MS, but a step increase is, I think, 2.3%. Ms. Wigington can step in and correct me. I think it averages 2.3%. So if the state stepped out or lands on a 3% increase, a step increase wouldn't get us there. And so we would not be eligible for the state funding.
I see. Okay. And then if we did a cost of living adjustment, like if we do, is there a dollar amount that can be associated with each percentage?
Yes, and that's what Ms. Derenak Koufax's amendment is based on. It's about 24.6 million, nearly 25 million per percentage point.
I see.
So, Ms. Cornell, if you could show Ms. Derenak Koufax's amendment, which I have corrected, the section B. So a 3% is 73.7 million. So it's about 24.6 per percentage point. We would be eligible for state revenue of an estimated 13.4 million. And so that would increase the county transfer by 60.3 million.
All right.
Ms. Tolan, Ms. Tolan,
Yes.
This is Dr. Brabrand. Just for clarity, maybe for your own thinking, and I won't speak for Ms. Derenak Koufax, but as a reminder, the step is for those employees eligible for the step. Not
Right.
every employee would receive a step increase. And
Right.
so the 3% market rate adjustment would affect every employee's salary. Again, so there's different ways to meet the state. You could do a 3% market rate adjustment or MSA, or you could do a step plus a 1% MSA. But again, when you do a step, not every employee would get that compensation change, just as FYI.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, I was just trying to look at all of our various options. So this is very helpful.
Thank you. Are you complete, Ms. Tolan? Yes. Okay,
I am.
thank
Thank you.
And just speaking, Dr. Brabrand, yes, I appreciate that, but that was my intent when I began speaking with everyone. I wanted everyone to get an increase, and I knew the step wasn't the way to do it this year. So thank you for pointing out that fact. Appreciate it. Ms. McLaughlin.
Great, thank you. Very much appreciate staff presenting the area information we have on raises for surrounding school systems. I think it's important for the Board of Supervisors and the public to understand what's driving this board in wanting to increase our transfer request to the county, despite the guidance that we value and understand they've given us about revenue projections. I guess my first question on this would be, what do we know about for FCPS employees for FY22 at a minimum because of increases to health insurance premiums or just the projected inflation rate? Ms. Burden, what at a minimum would we want to ensure our employees receive so they're not taking their take-home pay isn't less than it was for this current year? What is that expected calculation?
We would have to take that as a budget question because it is going to depend on the plan that the employee chooses, whether it be Aetna, Care First, or Kaiser, and also which plan they select, employee only, employee plus dependents, family plan. It's going to depend on what their choices are as to what the impact would be. So we would have to take that as a budget question.
Ms. Burden, I appreciate that, but that variable would have so many different nuances, and that's even step. So my question is, we're hearing from our employees, and I believe we've been hearing from staff and certainly from other school board members that if we don't do something, our employees will have lower take-home pay than the year before. If you're telling me that your staff has done no calculations about what the average increased rate in employee benefit costs will be, then what is driving this conversation in a data-driven way about how employees might be working for less money this year than they, for next year that they are right now? There's got to be something driving that.
Yeah, Ms. Wigington is going to answer that, but the reason that people are probably talking about it right now is the increases in the current year went into effect in January. So you would see that effect in your paycheck just with the last pay on January 31st.
Well, even more so. And you've got the data to be able to see what increases have started in January and going to carry over starting July 1. Secondly, you all have shown in our budget that our employer contribution costs are going up to whatever percentage that is. So how wouldn't we be able to use that at least as extrapolating that if the employer cost goes up X percentage for the next year, then we can anticipate that the employee will see a similar cost differential. I mean, what is that number? What did ours go up for employer healthcare contribution costs?
Yeah, I'm going to let Ms. Wigington jump in because she has a finer sense of the details.
Sure.
Ms. McLaughlin, if I could speak to that just briefly. We do have a budget question similarly that was asked, and we are in the process of trying to get that posted. But if I go to dollars on average per employee, if what we did was we calculated for the individual. So people who elected healthcare for an individual, on average across all three plans, an individual would see their healthcare go up by $7.17 per month, or $71 per year, because we pay for our healthcare coverage over a 10-month period. If you are an employee that selected family care coverage, on average, your monthly increase would have been about $29.91 per month, or over the full year, about $299, again, over a 10-month period.
That's appreciated in terms of understanding, but what did you all calculate was our percentage increase of healthcare employer costs this current year versus going into the next year?
So off the top of my head, it was anywhere from 5 to 6%. What we saw for the first half of the year is that our premium rate increases for all three medical plans ranged from 5.3% to 6.3%, depending on what employees included. And then because it only covers that, because we do our budget over fiscal year, our health plan is over calendar year, we have to project for the second half of the year, but we won't have that rate setting. And so that would have averaged about 6% as well, Ms. McLaughlin.
Thank you. That's exactly the number that I was trying to get to.
Okay.
So if our employer contribution is anticipated to be on average 6%, would that be the case then for employees, that it's about a 5 to 6% employee contribution change? I mean, I know you give me all the nuances and I'm not trying to go that granular. I'm just saying at a macro level, typically, do you see a similar effect?
Yes, because it is shared, percentage wise, equally between, in terms of whatever the rate that we pay as an employer, the employee is sharing that. So it should be similar.
So would they see 5 to 6% on their side and we see 5 to 6% on our side, or is it's a split differential? Like if it's anticipated the overall costs are 5 to 6%, are we taking 3% of that burden and they're taking 3% of the burden, or is it's 6% regardless, because it's how each person pays the portion of that overall 6%?
Correct. On the latter, right? Because FCPS plays like 85% of people that are enrolled in individual plans. So the employee would pay the remainder percentage. And then on family plans or mini family, we pay 75%. So it's that shares over top of both and split 25/75 or 15/85.
Okay. Excellent. So my colleagues, I think where I sit with this again is we want to demonstrate to the Board of Supervisors that we've got to remain competitive in employee pay from school division to school division. And we also should be taking advantage of the SOQ state matching funds as best as possible, because that was the intent of the state, to help with those who are providing instruction in K-12 education. I do have more questions about how we approach this. But overall, I'm inclined that we should be looking at a way to maximize state funding amounts. And if we don't ask for the 3%, we only do the 2%, then Ms. Burden, Ms. Whittington, do we then lose that state revenue benefit? I don't know if you heard the conclusion of my sentence, but my point being, if we only increase, if Ms. Dearnat-Koufax was at 2% MRA, and that's not going to help us qualify for state funding, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
So to me, that's extremely compelling. Thank you. I may need to go back, Ms. Koufax.
All right, thank you. Ms. Khan.
Thanks. I'm glad to get to go in this order because I think one thing is just super important for us to look at in all of this is that the market rate adjustment or market scale adjustment is that cost of living. And the biggest thing to me when we looked at what are all the various and sundry ways that we could figure out how to support our employees was making sure that our support professionals, so our hourly folks, our bus drivers and our janitors and our food service folks in particular, our parent liaisons. We have so many people who are not salaried employees, they're hourly employees. And I wanted to make sure that if we were having a conversation about how do we get on the right side of, where other systems are doing it, that, I mean, we're looking at a bus driver shortage right now that is really terrifying for what is to come going forward. And I think if we are not careful and make sure that if we're trying to, be competitive, I really am concerned if we choose something where we don't wind up supporting all of our employees. So I think that this market rate adjustment is the right way to do it. I feel like a lot of you guys do. This price tag gives me really significant heartburn. But I am also mindful of the conversation that if we don't do the 3%, we wind up leaving money on the table from the state. And so, I guess a conversation for another day is I don't understand why the state doesn't do this in a way like somebody's, 403B, where it's a match up to a certain percent so that big systems like ours don't wind up having to spend $60 million to take advantage of it. My question would be, when we look at the total cost, I know someone had done a breakdown, but I think it was before we got some of the labor amendments. Could we see what would our revised ask to the county look like with all of these amendments? That would be super helpful.
Ms. Cohen, you want with all of the amendments, not just one, not just the one we're talking about right now. You're saying everything.
Well, I think if it could be potentially, I know that in the past we've seen something where we say, here was Dr. Brabrand's ask, and here's what each amendment would add to it. So we had some sort of larger picture of what we're asking. I think that would be visually really helpful. Obviously that probably can't be done right this second, but I mean before Thursday night.
Ms. Burden or Ms. Wigington, is that possible?
Yeah, but I mean, the short answer is that right now our ask of the county is 42.7, and we can provide this in writing for Thursday night. This would add 60.3 million to that ask, so that it would be 103 million exactly. If you add in Ms. Anderson's 2.7, then it's going to go to 104.4. And then I believe Ms. Omesh's are total about 69 million. So that would take it to about 175 million. And then the last two from Ms. Sizemore-Heiser and Ms. Pekarsky asked to be funded by superintendent reductions, and so they would not have an effect.
Thank you for that quick analysis. Appreciate it. And yeah, if that can be in writing, that would be great. Next, I have Ms. Omesh.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion that's gone on this. Obviously, the importance is, without question. But I'm curious whether, given that we have some options here or some flexibility in anticipation of the state situation, if we can either, decouple or have a portion be what our expectation is, and then, I see that from our proposal in the morning, having been around 40 million. We're now looking at the 73-ish, right? So an increase in about 30. I mean, I see this as a possibility where we can say, we're bringing forward the teacher raises, and maybe, shameless plug, we are also bringing mental health supports for this particular year, given how dire it is. That way we're saying that this is what our ask is, given the needs. I think if we're able to ask for this and pull it off, that's something we should be thinking about. And then, or to say that, should the state then offer us the additional amount, we can allocate what we're asking for to that. But I'm a little bit taken aback at how we just increased this by over 30 when we just said that 30 for mental health was not a good time. But in any case, yeah, I just challenge how we're thinking about this a little bit, and would ask of my colleagues to consider that. If we balance this out, I think we can win for students and staff.
Thank you, Ms. Omesh. Next, I have Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
Thank you. I'm trying to get my video to turn on. First, I just have a question for probably Mr. Malloy, but I know, some of this changes from the state are new and still being discussed, but how much room do you think there is and realistically possibility of changing what the state is doing to better recognize the impact on larger school systems and how much it makes it a little more difficult for larger school systems to take advantage of their very generous offer? I guess I'm trying to get what Cohen started to talk about was, is there a way that this can be structured that we can more easily take advantage of it without having such a large ask to our county supervisors?
Well, I think the short answer is it's definitely something that we can advocate for at the state level. I will caution the notion that this affects large school systems all the same. There are large school systems who can accommodate this. Loudoun would be a great example. They already are, their proposal is already a fairly sizable increase, and that was probably based only on the 2% bonus that the governor was proposing. So different school systems have different ability to pay, and that's that's part of why we have such a challenge, is because not only are we a large system, but we also have our local composite index dictates that the state doesn't provide a great deal of our funding, that it's almost the vast majority of it comes from local sources. So, as I said, it's certainly something that we can advocate for. I think realistically, you will see them land somewhere in the 3 to 5% range. I will mention one additional data point for the chart that was there before, is that at the state level for state employees, the House is proposing a 3.5% increase for state employees, and the Senate is proposing a 3% increase for state employees as well. So it's not, that's what they're looking at for state employees is right around the 3 to 3.5% range as well, which kind of matches up with the discussion you're having here.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to, before I continue down this line of questioning, I just wanted to sort of address a couple of very valid concerns my colleagues, or questions that my colleagues had about the budget amendment I'm bringing on the neurodiversity specialist. I've already reached out to a couple of you to set up time to give more information. I know Dr. Anderson and Ms. Dernak Kovacs asked for more information, but I wanted just to bring up a little bit about the concern about the special ed audit. And I sent a pretty lengthy email. I know it was just this morning, but I did address that concern, but I wanted to bring up a couple things. First, one of the biggest needs that's already been identified in our AAP report was for a 2E coordinator. And so this position would cover that need. So I understand while we're waiting for a special ed audit, we've already had a report. I don't know if we necessarily need 2 reports on an identified need. In addition, it's just one position. So if the audit came out and had a bunch of positions that were different, this could be reclassified. So it's not a big ask for the special ed audit. And we do have work that we're continuing to do on special ed, even as we're waiting for the audit. For example, restraint and seclusion, where we did do a policy that, was our own as opposed to just what the state was giving. So I think there's room here to do work, even as we wait for the audit, and then revise it as we need to for the audit. But really, there is a great need for support for our 2E students. There's a great need at secondary school for supporting our students to be able to access areas of strength. It becomes a very deficit-focused model when our students have to really choose to get literacy, math, or executive functioning support. They have to choose to give up their electives and then spend their days in the classes with the same 10 to 20 students. Or on the flip side, have to choose classes where they may not be able to get as much support as they need and really struggle. So this is a long-standing need that this person could really address, as well as some of the culture change and working with the equity department. So I just wanted to put that out there, but I look forward to talking to more of my colleagues, and I think the colleagues who've already supported that. One additional question, I really would love to dig deeper into how our surrounding jurisdictions are able to fund this and we're not. And I know we've talked about differences in transfer from the county, but I imagine their counties must be facing similar budget constraints as our county is. So I'm just kind of curious how we ended up in this spot. So if anyone can kind of dust that piece of it.
Dr. Brabrand, do you want to speak to that?
Let me just make sure I got the shorthand, Rach. Now, you want to know how are the rest of the counties able to do it and us not?
Basically, yeah. You know, I imagine the budget shortfalls the other counties are facing is probably not far off, or budget forecast, budget picture not far off.
Well, I mean, I'm not the expert about other counties. I can simply say this. For example, because of LCI differences, Prince William gets over 40% of its money from the state. We only get 20%. So Prince William gets double the state money. Loudoun has been getting a lot of revenue, not just from its real estate residential, but commercially it has data centers, which has brought it a lot of short-term revenue. So those are just two examples of two larger systems near us. Again, a lot of it is very local specific. And, you know, I think we'll learn more when the county executive presents his budget about all of the revenue levers at play for Fairfax County this year. But it really is not one size fits all. And we have advocated for LCI being reviewed. This is something the Board of Supervisors knows well, that we put a lot more money in at the state than we get out. And that's why when things like this compensation comes around, it's a much easier lift in some jurisdictions when the great majority of the money is coming from the state. To do salaries in Fairfax, the great majority of the money is coming from the local government. And hence, that's the challenge. And I know right now, again, as I shared, that even the local government is challenged to pay its own employees. And I'm sure they would like to do it. And I've, again, advocated if they're in a position to do it, we would certainly want to partner with them for revenues so that we could do the same.
Thank you. And, you know, I see in the chat here, Dr. Brabrand, and I would, if you don't mind, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, I would like Michael to speak to the board's advocacy through the years on the LCI change, which is needed, but hasn't happened.
Yeah, so the board has had, I think since the LCI has existed, has had advocacy in terms of how the state measures local ability to pay. If you were to ask 132 different school divisions what they thought of the LCI, they would all tell you uniformly they hate it. But you would get 132 different answers as to why they hated it. There are, just for context, the local composite index sets the split between state and local. There, out of 132 school divisions, only 25 have a local composite index above 0.5, meaning that half or more of their funding comes from localities. The actual, I think, average local composite index is closer to 0.35, which means that about 65% of funding for a locality comes from the state, and about 35% of it comes from localities. So the vast majority of localities in Virginia are getting a majority of their funding from the state already. We are already an outlier in terms of how the local composite index measures ability to pay. The big issue in Northern Virginia, as opposed to pretty much anywhere else in Virginia, is the local composite index doesn't do a very good job of adjusting for cost of living differences. You know, when you look at any sort of data about cost of living differences between Northern Virginia and elsewhere in the state, it's at least a 30% difference, if not higher. But that doesn't really get reflected anywhere in any of the state funding formulas. The only exception is cost of competing funding, which is a kind of a small increment that they've added in to help make up a little bit for its cost of living differences. But for the most part, it's not adjusted for within the local composite index.
Thank you, Mr. Malloy. Appreciate that. Mr. Frisch.
Thank you. So I guess I have a question about the steps forward from here. Assuming that several of these amendments pass on Thursday, how will the county know, based on what's passed, what our priorities are? In other words, if they receive several amendments but don't have the funding to fund everything, how will they pick and choose? Will that be something that's worked out behind the scenes by staff?
Mr. Frisch, it's not, they don't receive our amendments.
Well,
they receive our budget in the aggregate based on what the advertised budget is. Because the Board of Supervisors doesn't have line item control over the school system's budget. They could say, we're not going to fund something, but whatever funding level they give us, then it's up for us to decide how those funds will be spent. So the amendments aren't something that it's just the budget in the aggregate that's conveyed.
But to that end, we're asking for, at least in the superintendent's proposed budget, $40 million in addition to what we would expect in the transfer. And I doubt that they're not seeing this conversation. So when thinking about what they might be able to do over what we were expecting in the transfer, is there any mechanism for us to identify priorities?
Dr. Anderson presents the budget to the County Board of Supervisors, I think in about a month or so. And during that time, I think that she would normally identify what the priorities are. And you're absolutely right that they will absolutely be aware that the superintendent's proposed request was 43 million and that the compensation increase was deemed to be, if we end up there, that the compensation increase was deemed to be a priority and added to that. So yeah, I mean, from a practical point, you're absolutely right.
And Ms. Burton, I would also share that both boards will have an opportunity to talk about their budgets at the March 2nd joint budget meeting.
Yes, thank you. That's correct too.
All right, I appreciate that.
Mr. Frisch? Oops, looks like we lost him. Oh, yes. Ms. Malberg, just keep track of his time and we will see when he reconnects and we'll get him back on. Still not here. All right. The hands that are up would be for go backs. So has anyone who has not yet spoken on the, Mr. Frisch, you're back. And then I will restate let's Mr. Frisch finish up his comments.
I apologize. Blackboard
No worries.
just disappeared on me.
We're all there.
I think I left off at the end of that question about the joint board meeting. I hope that we can come to some form of a consensus about nailing down not just that we broadly agree that compensation is a priority, that addressing learning loss is a priority, and that we also address social emotional issues, but that we identify how we prioritize those things. Coming in with a request for what is essentially $200 million in additional beyond the what was to be expected in the transfer we're going to have to be a little bit more specific than simply identifying the broad areas of need. And I hope that we can come to some form of a consensus on what we would like those priorities to be in order of spending. Thanks.
I see, I'm sorry, Miss Marion, I see you have your hand up because everybody prior to you has already spoken once.
Yes, thank you. Just trans. Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
We can hear you.
I muted out. I support, more in the 2% range. I mean, I understand what's being said about leaving state money on the table, but Ms. Darren Kofax, you know probably better than anyone with all of your dealings with the state and in this session, as you said to me, it would be nice if they could offer, money without having to match it. It's kind of like a half of a offer. So. And I do agree that it's still a big ask, and there are other needs. So I'm most comfortable with the COLA, with the MSA adjustment. And I think that we really need to revisit how we do our budget work, because the budget work and the General Assembly advocacy work go hand in hand. And while we kind of take it a little bit slower in the summer and in the early fall on budget work, I think we need to really rethink how we're going to go forward and do something on this local composite index that has been crippling us for decades. I'm not sure what it will take for our Fairfax delegation of senators and delegates to do something on our behalf, but it is crippling us. And I look forward to us as a board figuring out how to be more effective advocates at the state level to get something to change. So thank you.
Thank you, Miss Marin. And does anybody else want to have a first go round before I go to go backs? All right. So it looks like we have 3 go backs, and I will go in the order here that's showing on our screen, starting with Miss McLaughlin. And this is 1 minute, please.
Okay, thank you. I do want to say, first of all, I hear what Mr. Furr says, and I do think that getting some clarity here from staff, as I understand it, we're not asking for a $200 million increase in the transfer request. In total, what we've layered on is the superintendent says we've got revenue shortfalls that are about 42 million. We then want to do something about employee raises. That's another 60 million in the ask. So we're at about 100 million. Is that correct, Ms. Burden?
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
Okay, so we are looking at $100 million ask. I will lament that many of us talked about this almost a year ago in the spring, that we might be facing revenue shortfalls and decisions that were being made that, as we now know, a $10 million hit to our beginning balance to help with F&S costs or food nutritional service costs, and additional decisions that were made in how we dealt with our overall costs. The public has been asking, how is it that we have 13,000 fewer students and we don't see cost savings coming forward here at all? So all of that being said, I still support that we do not lose the state revenue money, and that we go ahead and support the 60 million additional ask to the board group.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Dr. Anderson, followed by Ms. Cohen.
So I'm just turning on my mic. I really just had a question that I wanted to ask, and it came up a little bit with Ms. Tolan's question earlier regarding step increases in the MSA. I would like just to maybe just add a budget question. I'd like to see a breakdown to see in terms of step increase, how that impacts each employee group with a similar comparison to the MSA. Like where are folks now and where would it take them? And I could explain that a little bit further, Ms. Burden, but that's the only thing that I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen.
I actually have Ms. Pekarsky on the phone too, who keeps getting kicked off and has had her hand up.
Okay, do you want to let her go first since she hasn't spoken yet?
If that suits, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you. I missed a good chunk of the end there, but I actually think somebody texted me that Ms. McLaughlin brought up some of the points that I wanted to make regarding enrollment and next year and having to look at that because we are, you know, the reality is I am getting questions about that. And with not knowing what the fall is going to look like, I think that is something we need to have a, you know, really good answer to. And if staff could speak a little bit, and if you already have answered Ms. McLaughlin, that's fine. I can touch base with her. But if not, I would love to hear some of the thinking around that.
And
was that question for me?
Go ahead and see if you can. Yes, please.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, and some more specificity on what the fall would look like in specifics.
Let me try on this one, and then Lee or Marty jump in. So, Ms. Pekarsky, the issue about enrollment is, are the folks that left us coming back, right? And so how much do you make enrollment changes to our projections that we had from the spring? And we recognize that we did have some students that did not return. And this is an issue of a budget where we have kept our projections based on what they were in the prior budget. If our kids return and we don't have the staffing, we're going to see higher class sizes. And we won't have the staff, and they'll be going to other jurisdictions, and then we'll be fighting to find new people for the positions in the middle of a teacher shortage, both in the Commonwealth and nationwide. So enrollment's a reasonable question to ask, but it's also, are we betting on our families not returning to FCPS, or that this was a 1 year, once in a lifetime, once in 100-year moment. And when we return, and our aspiration is to return to 5 days of in-person instruction, the projections that we had previously put out will hold. And so that's the conversation, and that's the response. And that's where our state is too. Our state, with the governor holding school districts harmless, the state is also betting that our students in the Commonwealth will return to school districts. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brabrand. And I certainly hope that is true, but with the uncertainty of the fall, you know, I think Loudoun County went ahead and made some adjustments, I believe. So I think, if not now, this may be something we may want to reassess and have some more conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pekarsky. Now, Ms. Cohen, please go ahead for your minute.
Thank you. I just wanted to circle back to Ms. Sizemore-Heiser and Karen Corbett-Sanders' amendment, and just put a plug in, you know, I would say in our own house. And I think one person is for sure not going to be enough, but I think it's a start. You know, we see, and Ms. Sizemore-Heiser referenced it, but even in our own house, having kids choose between having them go to the, fair where you go as an elementary school kid and you're super excited about, what are all the courses that you can take. And then they get home and you start to actually do the schedule and you realize that if your kid is a candidate for double block math and strategies for success, they don't get band and strings or chorus or language, even foreign language opportunities. All of those electives are gone and used up for opportunities to be assessed. And it continues on. It continues in high school where you have to make choices between chorus or taking a small group chemistry class. And so I think, to your point, it is a small piece of a much bigger pie, but I just wanted to say I'm very supportive of it and would be happy to speak with my colleagues in support of it as well.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Ms. Corbett Sanders and then Ms. Tolan. And again, we are going to wrap up at 3.
Thank you. I actually have a clarification question. Ms. Derenak Kovacs put in a motion for a MSA for everybody, a market scale increase for everybody. My question is, we are not going to do any steps if we go forward with this. So there will be some teachers that will now go 2 years without a step. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How does that impact long-term retirement? Just out of curiosity, have we done any numbers on that?
No, we have not. As you know, step increases are movement on the schedule. They do not enhance your schedule at all. So that a division who opts to do step increases instead of market scale adjustments will, in the face of other divisions giving market scale adjustments, will quickly fall behind. It's a judgment call, I guess. The people at the top of the scale don't get step increases. The hourly pay bands, if it's not an MSA, it's a step increase. It's not applied to those. An MSA ensures that a salary increase goes to everyone and has the benefit of enhancing our schedules in comparison with other divisions.
Lee, if I could, for a twist, and correct me if I'm wrong in my response to Ms. Corbett Sanders. Ms. Corbett Sanders, depending on your retirement, and there's multiple different retirements based on when you entered Fairfax, you're really looking at your last 3 years of salary or your last 5. And whether you move on the step or MSA, the MSA ensures everybody gets additional salary increase. And that will be reflected in your last 3 or 5 years of salary, even if you don't move on the step. So you will get noted in retirement additional retirement dollars, whether you get a step or you do an MSA. Is that correct, Lee?
Yes, that is correct.
So nobody caps out. Is the benefit of an MSA is nobody hits a ceiling and it isn't able to continue to grow.
That's it. And on the step, you do cap out, and that's the difference.
I just thought it was really important for people to understand the difference between the two. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett Sanders. Ms. Tolan.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, and I can put this down as a budget question as well, especially with some of the amendments that we were looking at that are relatively small dollar amounts. One of the things that we did several months ago, looking at the budget, is we had charts that also followed what were any savings that we incurred, over the past year by not, operating our building fully. And I'm just curious, perhaps, we weren't running our buses the way we were, but perhaps, any fuel savings, et cetera, were taken up with food distribution, it would be interesting to know that, or, the energy savings that we had in our buildings, with not, heating and air conditioning over the last year, was that, money used up in, HVAC, enhancements. I just curious, and I think I've gotten a few questions from the public too, just based on how we are doing things differently and running virtually, what savings do we have?
Ms. Tolan, we can definitely look at that. And one of the things for the public to understand too is there's one-time savings like fuel for buses or the electricity bill. But if we're back in school 5 times or 5 days a week next year, those savings won't be reoccurring. So we can't bank forward in the budget money that's only one-time savings. It's sort of the opposite. The CARES money is only one-time revenue. Some of our expense savings is only one time as well, but we can work with Ms. Burden and Marty and the team to try to identify where some of that is, but it would only be one-time dollars in many cases.
Right, understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else before I take my 1 minute? All right. Thank you all for allowing the extension of this conversation. It was helpful to me as one of the makers of the motion, and hopefully to all of you. Just quickly, MSA was, I chose it for the reasons that were given by Lee. It will help us to keep pace with surrounding jurisdictions. I will reach out to all of you with Ms. Cohen to see where your thoughts are on this compensation amendment. And at this point, I am inclined to support the revised amendment that was noted here in this work session, which is the 3% to take the most advantage of the state's funds and to keep in line with what the General Assembly is proposing. And who knows, there might be changes by the time Thursday comes, but I thank you for your time on this afternoon very much. And staff, thank you for being flexible. Ms. Burden and your team, Dr. Brabrand and Mr. Malloy, for being here as well. Dr. Anderson, we have 7 minutes before you would like to go into closed. I will turn this meeting back over to you and consider this part of the work session closed. Thank you.
Thank you. What I would like to do, because I do know we have a very tight schedule for our closed session, is to go ahead and make the motion to go into close now and convene and close at 3 o'clock. So we have a little bit of a break. So at this time, the board will now make a motion to go into closed meeting to discuss and consider personnel matters pursuant to section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia. I see that's been moved by Ms. Somesh, seconded by Ms. Cohen. All in favor? We have Ms. Somesh, Ms. Cohen, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Corbett Sanders, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Sizemore Heiser, Ms. Darnat Koufax, Ms. Marin, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Pekarsky, and myself. That will pass. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, I did not record a vote for you, but we will see everyone in close at 3 o'clock. So we have about a 6-minute break. Thank you all.